Hello everybody, my name is Chris. I edit MCV, which is the UK games industry paper. I've been writing about eSports for about 5 years, and last month we did our first eSports magazine, which is quite handy when you consider the topic of the panel. How many in this room actually have even a passing knowledge of eSports? Oh, there's quite a few, far more than I thought. Well, in that case, you can probably not listen to the next bit. For those not familiar with the world of pro gaming, the sector isn't actually all that new. It dates back to the 90s when gamers would lug massive kits of PCs to events to compete in games of Quake. For years it remained a niche part of the industry. There were a few moments where it threatened to get bigger when the likes of ESPN got involved, but it never truly did, until about 5 years ago when Twitch happened and the live streaming boom exploded, which brought esports into the homes of millions. Esports is now, according to SuperData, is now a $1 billion industry. By 2019, it's expected to have about 320 million people watching. Pro players are now stars, rich stars, some of them. The Call of Duty tournament that's going on this week has a $2 million prize pool, $800,000 for the winner. And last year's League of Legends finals attracted 36 million viewers. It's the fastest growing sport in the world, and you'll now see it on the back pages of newspapers, even on the BBC. Yet it's not without its challenges. For all its growth in viewers, revenue is proving harder to come by. It's also a market that is largely unregulated so far, with issues surrounding cheating and gambling, and which has deterred some big sponsors from getting involved. And one of the other challenges of esports, just like the wider games industry, comes in the form of diversity. If esports wants to be taken seriously, it needs to shed that boys' club stereotype. To talk us through that topic in particular and the opportunities that are in esports, we have an amazing panel. Amy Yu, Carleigh Morgan, Isabel Davies and James Dean. Guys, thank you all for coming along. To begin with, can I ask each one of you to sort of introduce yourselves, what it is you do in the scene and what your experiences have been in the esports sector, perhaps starting with you, Amy?
Hello. Okay, it's on. Hi, my name is Amy. I am the founder of Game Britannia. We run intercollegiate esports tournaments for universities in the UK. I started Game Britannia with a vision to create a connected community for students in the UK where they have a platform to show off their skills and talents in the games that they're so passionate about. And going forward, I really want to work more with universities to bridge that gap between education and gaming, with a focus on esports and game development. There we go.
Hello everyone, my name is Carleigh Morgan. I'm an early career researcher at King's College London, and my focus broadly is on digital subjects and computationalism, but I'm specifically interested in professional gaming. So I am also the program manager for a brand new international esports think tank, whose larger mission globally is to connect researchers and academics to signal boost esports, and to create a community hub of interested individuals who are liable to collaborate with organizations like Twitch or ESL, and we are prototyping a few different advisory boards right now, one of which involves diversification and gender in gaming.
Hi everyone, I'm Isabel Davies. I'm a legal and business analyst at specialist video games and esports law firm Purell & Partners. We're very lucky to represent some of the biggest esports companies in the world, which is great. Actually, outside my legal role is where most of my diversity work falls. So I'm a member of a Dota 2 all-female LAN tournament organiser and group. And on the side of that, I also work quite closely a lot with traditional media organisations in order to promote female esports in particular.
Hi, I'm James Dean. I'm co-MD of the UK subsidiary for ESL, so we have 15 subsidiaries across the world. ESL's one of the was founded over 20 years ago, so it's now the world's largest. And apart from obviously representing the local contingent on what we're doing in the UK, of which we do have some female employees who all couldn't make it here, unfortunately, today in my place. But I'm very proud to represent ESL here, and also, more importantly, a group called AnyKey, which is a diversity initiative that ESL is involved in.
Okay. Well, esports, as I mentioned earlier, has been painted a little bit like as if it's a bit of a boys' club. Is that fair? And what are the challenges for women that you're finding in the space?
So I would say at the moment it is very heavily dominated by males, but I think if we can present more female role models and encourage diversity and promote education through the community, then we can really promote more female models into the esports industry.
A few people have touched on this already, but I just want to reiterate again that I think it's really important to distinguish the ought from the is. And I think statistically speaking, the target esports audience tends to be the millennial male. And I think that is a stereotype that needs to be interrogated, deflated, and deconstructed, because if you look at the games community more largely, women actually are producers, consumers, and players of about 50% of the games out there. So the fact that there's this discrepancy in the esports industry specifically, I think, speaks to particular problems or issues that arise within the industry itself. So I think it's important to consider that when you look at esports and you see that it is so heavily dominated by men, it's not just a problem of enticing women to join the industry or empowering women to join esports or promoting women to join the esports in positions of decision-making or policy-making or leadership roles, but also celebrating and recognize those pioneering women who are already working in the industry, who aren't receiving the accreditation and the visibility.
Women can play video games, but should they be highly competitive at video games? Should they be very successful at video games? So it's a slight change on that, heritage view of women in games. As well, like as Carleigh and Amy both noted, there is massive issues in the coverage of females currently in esports. There are articles, is analysis, there's stats about loads of the male esports tournaments, but even trying to find out when the next female esports tournament is a real struggle. So I think until the coverage improves and then viewership improves and then sponsorship and money follows that, there will always be a real problem, I think, for women in the scene.
And just to echo that, from a tournament organiser, apart from actually organising tournaments, our main job is really to produce content. So it's creating a viewership for the tournaments themselves. So that's where obviously we see the real problems lie, because as Carleigh quite rightly put, that it's not an issue of trying to entice women into the industry as it's growing. They're already there. It's making it safe and a nice environment to actually work in. So naturally, with content that's bringing in millions of viewers online, if a female is presented on that content, she's going to get a lot of issues thrown at her, which is going to put females off working in the industry on the whole.
Yeah, sorry, can I just add one little thing? So I just really want to say that when I was organising university tournaments, we had over 30 universities, and there was one team only from King's College, where there was one female player on that team with all the male players. And I think, for me, that was an achievement because I saw a spark of, community acceptance. And if we could just focus on that one point and make that grow, and I think we can do a lot in that sense.
I completely agree with Amy, and I think that at the heart of this question, there's another question as well, which is how do you talk about sexism in an industry that's so tech-enabled? Because the games industry and esports is not the only industry guilty of this. It's endemic to any industry that so heavily relies on digital media and technology. And the problem obviously doesn't start within the esports industry, but that doesn't mean we can't propose solutions that don't generate outcomes within the esports industry. So I think it's important to remember that with respect to women in esports, it's not as if women are being edged out or women are being excluded or marginalized because there are malicious individuals keeping them on the brink of entry into esports. Sexism is, I think, as someone else pointed out this morning, structural and infrastructural and systemic. And so the problems are much larger than can be pinpointed with kind of an individual basis.
I know that you have been quite proactive in the space to try and effectively sort out some of these issues, and I don't know if, James, you want to start with your any key initiative, but I know ESL have been very active in this.
Yeah, so ESL partnered with Intel mainly around an initiative called Anarchy. It's not the only initiative, of course. It's great that women in games are now looking at esports, and it's great with some of the amazing work you three are doing here, to say the least. And actually, I've got a bit of a treat for you guys, because Anarchy's actually started to create a series of videos called the All Stars. And unfortunately, we can't stream it, so Sam needs to turn the stream off because it's unreleased right now. But I'd love to share that with you, if that's all right.
So, James, talk us through that a little bit then. So what is Anarchy trying to do, and what else are you doing?
It's leading on to what the ladies here were talking about earlier, and it's identifying some of the key issues first, because there's lots of stereotypical perceptions on the problems within diversity within esports, especially. Again, thinking about the difference between esports and gaming is generally because it's competitive and it's creating a lot of content online. So apart from writing a code of conduct and doing a lot of research and a few white papers now, working with Intel around the Intel Extreme Masters, which is some of the largest esports events around the world. Intel has put on an all-ladies Counter-Strike tournament, and generally speaking, Counter-Strike is actually at one of the lowest subscribed games for females. That's generally because the research shows that it's because it's a little more dominant by the male player base, and it's extremely violent. If you compared to a game such as Dota 2 or League of Legends, it's a lot more prescribed by females. So interestingly, doing a tournament around Counter-Strike really does go ahead and just disprove all of those ideas and perceptions that females shouldn't be in this space. Obviously, in an ideal world, this would be a mixed team. It wouldn't be an all-female team, but we need to try and start creating those role models, and people who watch this videos and the All-Star series, hopefully that puts the point across. And males and females will look at that, get some inspiration, and start respecting the actual skill within the game itself.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying, because I think female players need to have that nurtured environment in order for them to really recognize their talent and have the confidence to be competing with the boys. And yeah.
Yeah, I think as well, though, it also comes down fundamentally to, excuse me, the subject that people tend to avoid, which is money and resources. And there are plenty of role models in esports, but it's just a matter of giving them the limelight that they deserve and using the money. This is why ESL's strategic partnership with Anarchy, I think, is so instrumentally important, because it's giving them a platform and giving them the resources and the positioning that they deserve and that they need to then foster those opportunities for other women who want to break into the esports industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this kind of content is exactly the sort of thing we need going forward. And I think even though the whole subject of female teams is quite divisive, I think the general consensus among the industry is that it is really needed at this stage, and hopefully it's something that over the next 5 to 10 years we won't see anymore, but at this stage is absolutely vital in terms of getting women on the stage, getting women in front of the camera and performing and showing what they've got.
Carleigh, I mean, you mentioned a moment ago that there's areas of discrimination, identifying those. Have you identified any sort of points, areas of resistance that when you're trying to improve the diversity of esports?
I think there's a lot of variety in the types of discrimination that you can identify that's endemic to the esports industry. I think speaking in broad terms, generally there still seems to be this pervasive misapprehension about who games are designed for, who that target audience is, particularly in esports, and who is equipped or, let's say, biologically conditioned to be competing at the professional level. And there still seems to be this prevailing notion that skews towards, well, men are by nature more aggressive and more competitive, and therefore that is one of the reasons why they've ascended to this competitive throne and why you see men dominating the sphere professionally as pro gamers. But I think we need to take that biological essentialism, break it down, and think about what cultural stereotypes are reinforcing those positions and why people are still thinking this way. I also think there's a lot of maybe micro-resistances that come up a lot. You see just online harassment coming up again and again, where women aren't really able to participate freely in games because they have to use gamer tags that don't initially out them as female, lest they face a gauntlet of justification where they're inquired about who they are and why they're participating in this game and how good they are and how literate they are in a specialized body of knowledge about a particular game title. And likewise, you see people disabling voice chat or not using Discord because if people find out they're female, then they have to go through a whole series of hoops before they can just enjoy the game and play it. So I think there's a lot of issues that scale both very broad and also very narrow, and a lot of different ways to address those.
And may I just add, apart from the actual player base as well, it's of course about the audience and where they go, and we look at the physical events and what's actually on offer for women attending these events. The Aniki research was finding that a lot of females were going just because of their partner, their male partner was saying, oh, I want to go to this event this weekend, come along with me. And she's like, all right, okay. But there is also, you would say, quite hardcore fan base, just as hardcore as males, just in a smaller number. And when we look at what's on offer at those events for females, for example, we looked at our own events, and our merchandise store had very little in the way of female T-shirts, which is crazy if you think about it. I know there's a smaller audience there, but there should be at least a couple of T-shirts available, or the whole range in theory. So there's always that aspect of the actual audience as well, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say, yeah, ESL have done a really good job, I think, particularly over the last few years, of diversifying the kind of things that they have at their events and their lands. And it's not just about the game itself and, all the drinking of the beer and all that, but they have, things like cosplay competitions, like really great artwork, sort of areas where artists can show off their work, which has always proved really popular. And I think they've really made their gaming events into almost like festivals for celebrating the game, and there's way more than just the game itself and things that would appear just to maybe the more male-skewed audience.
And I think everyone's pretty much covered on the resistance for the female gamer side of things. From my perspective, as a tournament organizer, I actually found the community to be really, really supportive. So I was communicating with James from ESL. I had Twitch's support. I had so many enthusiasm towards what I was doing. And I was literally selling my concept, my idea about university communities, because everyone realizes that diversity starts from the community, grounds up, and we need to really work with universities and young people to educate them about the role models so that we can progress to the eSports ecosystem that we want to create.
Okay, well, we're having to. We've got about 5 minutes left, so I'll rattle through the last. What recommendations and what advice would you offer to people either looking to get into esports, but also those within it who, in terms of helping to improve gender diversity?
I think fundamentally it's critical for both men and women who are already in the industry not to treat women as a minority demographic, because, as I suggested earlier, women make up a very large proportion of video game consumers and players. So if you treat women like an exotic subspecies or some sort of marginalized subgroup that need to be marketed to differently by virtue of the fact that they're women, I think then you're going to be isolating quite a few people. Also, I think that we need to agree to do away with the term girl gamers, because it's infantilizing and patronizing and prioritizes people based on their gender versus the fact that they are, say, for example, a professional athlete or an esports competitor. So it might be a bit clumsy, but I think if we change the language, it's also going to be indicative of a larger sea change in the way that we're thinking about women in gaming. So I am a gamer that happens to be a female, or I am a gamer that happens to be a male. And I think the last thing I would say is, for those interested in bringing women into the fold, recognize that, anyone up here, we don't represent the full spectrum of views that women have about the esports industry. So my view about all-female tournaments, for instance, and the controversy surrounding whether or not we should have strictly all-female tournaments or integrated tournaments is not representative of women as a monolith. So I think asking women what they need and understanding that there will be differences of opinion is the first step to truly supporting progress in esports.
I'd just quickly like to add, I think, lending on what Amy was saying earlier, really, as a female looking to go into the industry or working in the industry but trying to do some more work, I think reaching out to the support groups that are popping up all over the place. I mean, even on Reddit, I think there's some good support groups there, and approaching Aniki, talking to women in games, etc. So there's also one thing Aniki is looking at is trying to work on that kind of education, if you like, in how to deal with these issues. And because there's a huge volunteer base out there for female streamers, etc., who will moderate chat. There's technology being produced to help do that as well. So it really is about looking out and finding those support groups to join or contribute to.
Yeah, to say, absolutely reach out to networks of people. I think I've approached loads of people just through like Twitter and Reddit, of people that have read interesting stuff about. It's one of the reasons how I found Carleigh originally, through Twitter. So just find people out there and don't be afraid to talk to them, because people in the esports industry really want to see other women in there and are keen to hear from interesting people. From a personal standpoint, I would love to see more, traditional media publishers and game-specific publishers doing more female esports-driven content, which is my kind of long-term goal for the scene. Yeah.
I absolutely agree with what everyone said. That's what I did when I first initially started my business last year in August. I didn't know anything about esports. I just thought, I want to change this. I want to create more content for the gamers, for the community. And I just started reaching out everywhere. And the level of support and help that I received was just absolutely amazing. And if anything, I will definitely keep working in this industry and do my best. Yay.
Thank you, guys. I'm afraid we're out of time for questions, but if you do have any, I'm sure Amy, Carleigh, Isabel, and or James will be around in the lunch break. Feel free to catch them. But we also, I think their contact details are all on the Women in Games, European Women in Games Conference website. Thank you all for listening. Enjoy the rest of your conference. Thank you.